Standing in the packed auditorium, watching our company's biggest product launch, I should have felt proud. Instead, my heart pounded as the countdown began on the massive screen behind our CTO. 3 months ago, when Derek Stevens fired me and claimed my encryption algorithms belonged to the company, I made a decision that would change everything. I deleted my personal encryption key on my way out of the door. Now, as the timer hit zero and the words "stolen property detected" flashed across the screen, Derek's terrified eyes found mine in the crowd. 6 months earlier, I thought I had landed my dream job. Austin, Texas was buzzing with tech innovation, and TechFlow Solutions seemed like the perfect place to build my career. At 28, I had spent the last 6 years developing revolutionary encryption algorithms during my graduate studies at Stanford. My dissertation advisor told me my work could transform cybersecurity, but I wanted to see it make a real impact in the commercial world. Derek Stevens called me personally after reviewing my application. His voice carried that confident charm that successful executives seem to master. He painted a picture of a cutting-edge startup where brilliant minds collaborated to change the world. The salary was generous, but what really drew me in was his promise of equity and creative freedom. My first day at TechFlow's sleek downtown office felt electric. The open-plan workspace hummed with energy as developers huddled around monitors, their conversations mixing technical jargon with excited laughter. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered stunning views of Lady Bird Lake, and the break room stocked every kind of artisanal coffee imaginable. Derek made a point of introducing me personally to the team. He had this way of making you feel special, like you were the missing piece his company had been searching for. During our initial meeting in his glass-walled office, he leaned forward with genuine interest as I explained my encryption methodology. "Elisa, this is exactly what we need to revolutionize data security," he said, his eyes lighting up. "Your algorithms could protect everything from personal banking to government communications. We want you to have complete creative control over this project." I felt a surge of excitement that I tried to contain professionally. This was what I had worked toward through countless late nights in Stanford's computer labs. Derek outlined how my encryption technology would become the cornerstone of TechFlow's flagship product, promising that my name would be prominently featured in all marketing materials. Sarah Martinez from the marketing department became my closest ally during those early weeks. She was about my age with an infectious enthusiasm for the tech industry and dreams of launching her own startup someday. We bonded over lunch conversations about breaking barriers as women in technology, sharing stories about professors who underestimated our capabilities and peers who assumed we were less qualified than our male counterparts. Derek really believes in promoting women in leadership roles, Sarah told me one afternoon as we grabbed salads from the food truck parked outside our building. He specifically hired me to change how tech companies market to female consumers. He says diversity drives innovation. The work environment felt collaborative and supportive. Derek regularly praised my progress during team meetings, highlighting how my encryption protocols exceeded industry standards. He encouraged me to present my findings to potential investors, building my confidence while raising my profile within the company. Tom Bradley, a senior developer with 15 years of experience, worked at the desk adjacent to mine. He was quieter than the younger employees, often staying late to review code while others headed to happy hour events. During my second week, he made an offhand comment that stuck with me. "Just make sure you keep personal backups of your work," he said casually while debugging a particularly stubborn function. Companies change direction fast in this business. I laughed it off at the time, assuming he was just being cautious after years in the industry. But something in his tone suggested deeper knowledge about TechFlow's operations. My encryption system worked by generating unique mathematical keys based on quantum-resistant algorithms I had developed independently during graduate school. The beauty of the system lay in its simplicity from a user perspective, while maintaining unbreakable security at the computational level. Users could encrypt sensitive data with a single click, but without the proper decryption key, even the most powerful computers would need centuries to crack the code. Derek seemed genuinely fascinated by the technical details, often stopping by my workspace to discuss implementation strategies. He asked thoughtful questions about scalability and processing requirements, demonstrating a deeper understanding of cryptography than most executives possessed. His attention made me feel valued and respected as both a technical expert and a key team member. The startup culture embraced long hours and weekend work sessions, but Derek balanced the demands with generous perks. He organized team building events at trendy Austin restaurants, brought in massage therapists during crunch periods, and maintained a fully stocked kitchen with organic snacks and kombucha on tap. The office felt more like a collaborative space than a traditional workplace. 3 months into my tenure, Derek invited the core team to celebrate our first major milestone at an upscale steakhouse in downtown Austin. The restaurant's dim lighting and intimate atmosphere made our table feel like a gathering of close friends rather than colleagues. Derek raised his glass of wine and toasted our collective achievement. To the brilliant minds who are going to change how the world thinks about data security, he announced, his smile encompassing the entire table. Elisa, your encryption breakthrough is the foundation for everything we're building here. The team applauded enthusiastically, and I felt a warm glow of accomplishment. Sarah squeezed my hand under the table, her excitement matching my own. Tom nodded approvingly from across the table, though I noticed his smile seemed more reserved than the others. As the evening progressed and conversations became more relaxed, I excused myself to use the restroom. Walking past Derek's table position, I overheard him speaking quietly into his phone while the others were engaged in animated discussion about Austin's music scene. The acquisition strategy is working perfectly, Derek was saying, his voice lower than usual but still audible. Once we have the technology locked down permanently, we can proceed with the next phase. Yes, she's documenting everything exactly as we hoped. My steps slowed involuntarily. The word acquisition seemed out of place in a conversation about our collaborative team project. Derek mentioned she in a context that made me uncomfortable, though I tried to rationalize that he could have been referring to any number of female employees or business contacts. When I returned to the table, Derek had finished his call and rejoined our group conversation about the best barbecue joints in Texas. His demeanor remained warm and engaging, but Tom caught my eye with a questioning look that suggested he had also noticed something unusual. Later that night, lying awake in my apartment overlooking Zilker Park, I replayed Derek's phone conversation in my mind. The logical part of my brain insisted I had misunderstood or taken his words out of context. Acquisition could refer to client relationships, competitor analysis, or dozens of other business strategies that had nothing to do with my work. But a small voice in the back of my mind wondered if Tom's earlier warning about keeping personal backups carried more weight than I had initially realized. By my 4th month at TechFlow, Derek's requests began shifting in subtle but meaningful ways. What started as collaborative brainstorming sessions gradually evolved into detailed documentation requirements that seemed excessive for internal team coordination. We need to ensure knowledge transfer capabilities for scaling purposes, Derek explained during a Monday morning meeting, his tone maintaining its usual supportive warmth. Investors want to see systematic approaches to intellectual property management. The explanation sounded reasonable, but the specific requests felt invasive. Derek wanted comprehensive flow charts detailing every step of my encryption process, annotated code samples with explanatory comments, and written protocols for implementing my algorithms across different programming languages. The documentation requirements went far beyond anything I had encountered in previous positions. Jennifer Walsh from Human Resources scheduled a meeting with me that Tuesday afternoon. Her office featured motivational posters about teamwork and innovation, creating an atmosphere designed to put employees at ease. Jennifer herself projected professional competence with her tailored blazer and perfectly styled hair. We're updating employment agreements to reflect our growth trajectory, Jennifer explained, sliding a thick packet of papers across her mahogany desk. These amendments ensure everyone benefits from our collective success while protecting proprietary information. The legal language felt dense and confusing, filled with terminology about intellectual property rights and company ownership of employee generated content. I asked for time to review the documents with an attorney, but Jennifer gently discouraged external legal consultation. These are standard industry practices, she assured me, her smile remaining warm despite the pressure. Our legal team has crafted these agreements to protect both individual contributions and company interests. Derek specifically wanted to ensure your innovative work receives proper protection under corporate intellectual property guidelines. Something about her phrasing bothered me particularly, the emphasis on corporate intellectual property guidelines. The original terms of my employment had clearly distinguished between work I brought to the company and innovations developed during my tenure. These new amendments seemed to blur those boundaries in ways that favored TechFlow's interests over my own. Sarah noticed my distracted mood during our weekly lunch at the food truck. We sat on picnic tables in the small park adjacent to our office building, watching downtown workers rush between meetings while we picked at our tacos. You seem stressed lately, Sarah observed, her concern evident in her voice. Is everything okay with the encryption project? I hesitated before sharing my concerns about the documentation requests and contract amendments. Sarah listened carefully, occasionally nodding as I described the increasing pressure to formalize every aspect of my work process. I've heard similar rumblings around the marketing department, she admitted quietly, glancing around to ensure our conversation remained private. There's talk about restructuring before the product launch. Derek mentioned cost optimization strategies during our last departmental meeting. The phrase cost optimization sent a chill down my spine. In startup terminology, cost optimization often meant eliminating expensive personnel once their essential contributions had been fully captured and documented. Has Derek said anything specific about individual employees? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual despite growing anxiety. Sarah shook her head but looked troubled. Nothing direct, but he's been asking detailed questions about everyone's contributions to the project. He wants to understand who's essential for ongoing operations versus who provided foundational work that could be maintained by others. That afternoon, I decided to research TechFlow's employment history more thoroughly. Public LinkedIn profiles revealed a concerning pattern of technical employees leaving the company shortly after major project completions. 3 senior developers had departed within the past 2 years, each following similar timelines that coincided with product launches. Tom Bradley remained at his desk long after most employees had headed home. I approached him during one of these late evening work sessions, hoping his experience with the company might provide valuable context for my growing concerns. Tom, can I ask you something confidential? I began, settling into the empty chair beside his workstation. He looked up from his code review, his expression immediately becoming more serious. What's on your mind? The employees who left TechFlow recently, do you know why they decided to move on? Tom saved his work before answering, his movements deliberate and careful. That's a complicated question, Elisa. Let's grab coffee and talk somewhere more private. We walked to a 24-hour diner 3 blocks from the office. The fluorescent lighting and vinyl booths provided an atmosphere conducive to honest conversation without corporate surveillance concerns. Derek has a pattern, Tom began once we had settled into a corner booth with steaming cups of coffee. He identifies talented individuals with valuable specialized knowledge, brings them in with generous offers and promises of creative freedom, then gradually extracts everything he needs before finding reasons to terminate their employment. My stomach nodded as Tom continued explaining how previous developers had faced increasing documentation demands, contract modifications, and workplace pressure before being pushed out of the company. The brilliant part of his strategy is that everything appears legitimate from a legal standpoint, Tom explained, stirring sugar into his coffee while keeping his voice low. He never directly steals intellectual property. Instead, he creates conditions where employees willingly document their knowledge sign agreements that benefit the company and ultimately leave feeling like they failed rather than recognizing they were manipulated. Why haven't you left? I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. Because I learned his game early enough to protect myself, Tom replied with a rueful smile. I keep my most valuable work compartmentalized and maintain detailed records of my contributions. Derek knows I understand his method, so he's never tried to push me out. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Derek's enthusiastic support, his interest in my technical details, his requests for comprehensive documentation, everything had been part of a calculated strategy to acquire my encryption algorithms without providing long-term compensation or recognition. What should I do? I asked, though Tom's expression suggested the options were limited. Document everything from your end, he advised. Keep personal records of your original work that predate your employment here. Be very careful about what you sign and start preparing for the possibility that Derek will try to force you out once he believes he has everything he needs. Walking back to my apartment that night, I realized how naive I had been about corporate politics and intellectual property manipulation. Derek's charm and seeming support had masked a sophisticated scheme to acquire valuable technology while minimizing long-term obligations to its creator. The next morning brought an email from Derek requesting a meeting to discuss exciting developments in our encryption project timeline. His message maintained its characteristic enthusiasm, but now I recognized the underlying calculation behind his carefully chosen words. Marcus Thompson, TechFlow's legal counsel, joined us in Derek's office for what was described as a strategic planning session. Marcus appeared professional and competent with an expensive suit and the kind of confident demeanor that successful corporate attorneys cultivate. We're accelerating our product launch timeline, Derek announced, his excitement seeming genuine despite my newfound skepticism. Investor interest has exceeded our projections, and we want to capitalize on current market conditions. Marcus spread several documents across Derek's conference table, each representing different aspects of intellectual property assignment and product development timelines. The papers included updated employee agreements, project completion benchmarks, and post-launch operational structures. These agreements ensure seamless integration of individual contributions into our corporate intellectual property portfolio, Marcus explained, his tone professional but somehow threatening. Everyone's innovations receive appropriate protection under company ownership structures. I asked pointed questions about individual recognition and ongoing compensation for algorithm development. Marcus responded with vague assurances about industry standard practices and competitive benefit packages, without committing to specific terms that would protect my interests. The meeting concluded with Derek emphasizing the importance of team unity and shared success. His words sounded supportive, but the underlying message was clear: conform to the new agreements or face consequences that could damage my career prospects in Austin's tight-knit tech community. That evening, I began creating encrypted backups of my original research and development work. If Derek planned to steal my algorithms, I would ensure that crucial elements remained under my control. The shift in Derek's demeanor became impossible to ignore during my 5th month at TechFlow. Gone was the collaborative mentor who had welcomed me with such enthusiasm. In his place stood a calculating executive whose true priorities had finally emerged from behind carefully maintained facades. The change became evident during our weekly team meetings, which Derek now dominated with aggressive questioning about project ownership and individual contributions. He dissected every aspect of my encryption work with surgical precision, demanding clarification about which elements I had developed before joining the company versus innovations created during my employment. We need absolute clarity about intellectual property boundaries, Derek announced during one particularly tense Monday morning session. Legal compliance requires comprehensive documentation of all algorithm components and their developmental origins. His questions felt like interrogations designed to establish legal precedent for corporate ownership claims. Derek pushed for detailed timelines showing exactly when specific innovations occurred, attempting to blur the distinction between my graduate school research and subsequent tech flow developments. Sarah's support became increasingly strained as workplace dynamics shifted around Derek's changing priorities. During one of our lunch conversations, she revealed pressure from upper management to distance herself from employees who might pose operational challenges to the company's growth trajectory. Derek pulled me aside yesterday. Sarah confided, her voice barely audible despite our isolated table location. He asked about your attitude toward company policies and whether you seemed committed to TechFlow's long-term success. The implication was clear. Derek was building a case to justify my eventual termination while gathering intelligence about my relationships with other employees. Sarah faced an impossible choice between supporting our friendship and protecting her own career prospects. I told him you were completely dedicated to the project, she continued, though her expression revealed internal conflict. But Elisa, he's been saying things about you in meetings when you're not there. He questions your reliability and suggests you might be planning to leave with proprietary information. Derek's character assassination campaign extended beyond private conversations with individual employees. During team presentations to potential investors, he subtly undermined my contributions while positioning himself as the primary architect of our encryption breakthrough. He would acknowledge my valuable input while emphasizing his own strategic vision and technical oversight. The most devastating betrayal came during a company-wide meeting in TechFlow's main conference room. Derek had assembled the entire staff to announce organizational changes designed to optimize operational efficiency as we approach the product launch timeline. We're restructuring technical responsibilities to ensure smooth transitions during our scaling phase. Derek began, his tone carrying false enthusiasm that barely masked underlying aggression. Some team members will be transitioning to new opportunities that better align with their career objectives. Everyone in the room understood the euphemistic language. Transitioning to new opportunities meant termination, and Derek's pointed glances in my direction made his intended target obvious to the entire staff. Elisa has made valuable contributions during our development phase. Derek continued, his words dripping with condescension. However, we've determined that her role will be concluded following the successful launch of our encryption platform. The humiliation of public termination announcement cut deeper than any private conversation could have. Derek had chosen to humiliate me in front of colleagues who had become friends, ensuring that my departure would be remembered as professional failure rather than corporate manipulation. Tom Bradley's expression reflected barely contained anger as Derek continued outlining personnel changes. Several other employees looked uncomfortable with the public nature of my termination announcement, but none spoke up to challenge Derek's characterization of my contributions. After the meeting, I requested a private conversation with Derek to understand his reasoning and explore potential alternatives. His office felt different, now transformed from a collaborative workspace into enemy territory, where every word would be scrutinized for legal implications. Derek, I don't understand why you're terminating my employment. I began, struggling to maintain professional composure despite emotional turmoil. My work has exceeded every benchmark we established, and the encryption platform is performing exactly as promised. His response revealed the calculated nature of his entire strategy. Derek had never intended to maintain long-term employment relationships with key technical contributors. His plan involved extracting valuable intellectual property during intensive development periods, then eliminating expensive personnel once their essential knowledge had been captured and documented. The company's needs have evolved beyond your original contributions, Derek explained, his tone dismissive and cold. We have sufficient documentation and technical expertise to maintain the encryption platform without requiring your ongoing involvement. But the algorithms are based on my graduate research. I protested, finally confronting the intellectual property theft directly. You can't simply appropriate work I developed independently before joining TechFlow. Derek's smile became predatory as he leaned back in his expensive leather chair. Surely, Alisa. Your employment agreements clearly specify that any work performed during company time using company resources becomes corporate intellectual property. Your algorithms were refined and implemented using TechFlow equipment and facilities. That's not how intellectual property law works, I countered, though Derek's confidence suggested he had carefully structured the theft to avoid obvious legal violations. Our legal team disagrees with your interpretation, Derek replied, gesturing toward Marcus Thompson, who had been silently observing our conversation from a corner chair. The agreements you signed provide comprehensive protection for company interests in all employee-generated innovations. Marcus opened a thick folder containing copies of documents I had signed during my employment. The papers included original hiring agreements, subsequent amendments, and detailed acknowledgments of company ownership rights that I had accepted without fully understanding their implications. The code belongs to us, Derek declared with finality, his mask of professional courtesy finally dropping completely. Get out. The words hit me like a physical blow. After months of manipulation and gradual betrayal, Derek's true nature stood revealed in all its calculating cruelty. Security personnel appeared at his office door before I could respond, making clear that my termination was immediate and non-negotiable. Walking through TechFlow's open workspace with security escorts felt like a perp walk designed to maximize humiliation. Colleagues who had become friends avoided eye contact, uncertain how to respond to the sudden transformation of a respected team member into a corporate security risk. Sarah watched from her desk with tears in her eyes, but she made no move to intervene or offer support. Tom Bradley stood from his workstation as I passed, his expression conveying solidarity, even though he couldn't openly challenge Derek's decisions without risking his own position. The security team supervised while I gathered personal belongings from my desk, ensuring that I took nothing that could be construed as company property. They confiscated my work laptop access badges and even notebooks, containing what they claimed were proprietary technical details. Standing in the elevator as the doors closed on TechFlow's office space, I realized that Derek had orchestrated every detail of my downfall with meticulous precision. He had identified my valuable algorithms, extracted comprehensive documentation, secured legal control over the intellectual property, and eliminated me as a potential threat to his ownership claims. But Derek had made one crucial miscalculation in his otherwise perfect scheme. He assumed that comprehensive documentation would provide everything needed to implement and maintain my encryption system. What he didn't realize was that the most critical component, my personal encryption key, existed only in my mind and on devices under my exclusive control. As the security escorts walked me to my car, I discreetly activated my smartphone and initiated a process that would ensure Derek's victory proved temporary. With a few carefully chosen commands, I deleted my personal encryption key from every system Derek believed he controlled. The algorithms he had stolen were useless without that key, and I had just ensured that TechFlow's $1 million product launch would become Derek's most public and devastating failure. My final confrontation with Derek Stevens took place exactly 1 month before TechFlow's scheduled product launch. The meeting occurred in the same conference room where Derek had publicly announced my termination, but now the space felt charged with different energy as I demanded answers about proper attribution and compensation for my intellectual property. I had spent sleepless nights researching employment law and intellectual property rights, consulting with attorneys who specialized in technology sector disputes. The consensus was troubling. While Derek's behavior was ethically reprehensible, his legal team had crafted agreements that provided plausible justification for corporate ownership claims. Derek, I'm requesting one final opportunity to resolve this situation fairly. I began settling into the chair across from his position at the head of the polished conference table. My encryption algorithms represent years of independent research that predates my employment here. I deserve recognition and compensation for that intellectual property. Derek's response demonstrated the complete transformation from supportive mentor to ruthless corporate predator. Gone was any pretense of collaboration or mutual respect. In its place sat a calculating executive who viewed me as an obstacle to be eliminated rather than a valuable team member deserving fair treatment. Elisa, we've discussed this extensively. Derek replied, his tone carrying condescending patience that felt more insulting than outright hostility. Your employment agreements clearly establish company ownership of all innovations developed during your tenure here. The legal framework is unambiguous. Marcus Thompson sat beside Derek with a thick folder of documentation designed to support their intellectual property claims. His presence served as both legal counsel and intimidation tactic, suggesting that TechFlow was prepared for prolonged litigation if I challenged their position. The algorithms were based on my doctoral dissertation research. I insisted pulling out printed copies of my graduate work with timestamps clearly predating my TechFlow employment. These innovations existed independently before I ever walked through your doors. But they were refined, implemented, and optimized using company resources, Marcus interjected smoothly. The commercial applications you developed represent substantial enhancements that constitute new intellectual property under corporate ownership structures. The circular logic was maddening. They acknowledged my original innovations while claiming ownership of any practical applications I had developed. Derek's scheme had been designed to create legal gray areas that favored corporate interests over individual rights. I want my name associated with this technology, I stated firmly, and I want equity compensation that reflects my contributions to TechFlow's success. Derek's laugh carried no humor, only cold amusement at what he perceived as naive demands from someone who lacked understanding of corporate power dynamics. Your contributions have been noted in our internal documentation, he replied dismissively. However, public recognition would create confusion about leadership responsibilities and intellectual property ownership. Our marketing strategy requires clear corporate branding without individual attribution complications. The conversation continued for another 30 minutes as I presented various compromise proposals that Derek rejected with increasing impatience. He had no intention of providing recognition compensation or ongoing involvement in the technology I had created. Finally, Derek's facade of professional courtesy cracked completely. Standing from his chair with aggressive body language that made Marcus shift uncomfortably, Derek revealed the calculating predator that had been hidden beneath months of carefully maintained charm. Let me be absolutely clear about something, Alisa, Derek snarled, his voice rising to a volume that carried beyond the conference room's glass walls. The code belongs to us. Your algorithms, your innovations, your precious encryption protocols, everything belongs to TechFlow Solutions. His words echoed through the open office space, drawing attention from employees who tried to appear busy while obviously listening to our heated exchange. Derek seemed to relish the public nature of his domination, using witnesses to emphasize my powerlessness against corporate authority. You were hired to do a job and you did it. Derek continued, his tone becoming increasingly cruel. Now that job is finished and so is your employment. You have no claim to ongoing recognition, compensation, or involvement in technology developed on company time using company resources. That's not legally accurate, I protested, though Derek's confidence suggested he had structured the theft to avoid obvious violations. Our legal team says otherwise, Derek replied, gesturing toward Marcus, who nodded supportively. We've spent considerable resources ensuring that our intellectual property claims are bulletproof. You can challenge us in court if you want, but litigation will cost more than you can afford and take longer than you can survive financially. The threat was clear. TechFlow had deeper pockets and better legal representation than I could match as an individual plaintiff. Derek was banking on my inability to sustain prolonged legal battles against corporate resources. Security, Derek barked, suddenly pressing a button on the conference room's communication system. Please escort Ms. Johnson from the premises immediately. Her employment has been terminated. and she no longer has authorization to be in this building. Two security guards appeared within moments, suggesting that Derek had planned this confrontation to end with my immediate removal. Their professional demeanor couldn't hide the awkwardness of forcibly ejecting someone who had been a respected employee just minutes earlier. The walk through TechFlow's office space became a public spectacle as colleagues watched my escort removal with expressions ranging from sympathy to relief that they weren't facing similar treatment. Sarah remained at her desk with tears streaming down her face, but she made no move to intervene or offer support. Tom Bradley stood as I passed his workstation, his expression conveying solidarity despite his inability to openly challenge Derek's authority. Several other employees looked uncomfortable with the aggressive nature of my termination, but corporate culture discouraged public displays of dissent. "Remember what I told you about documentation," Tom said quietly, as the security guards paused to allow me to collect personal belongings from my desk. His words carried deeper meaning that the security personnel didn't understand. Tom was reminding me about our conversation regarding the importance of maintaining personal control over essential work components. The security team supervised while I gathered photographs, personal electronics, and other items that clearly belonged to me rather than TechFlow. They confiscated anything that could potentially contain proprietary information, including notebooks with handwritten technical notes. "Your laptop access badges and company credit cards remain corporate property," one security guard explained as he collected items from my desk drawers. "Any attempt to access company systems after termination would constitute illegal intrusion." The irony was that Derek believed he had eliminated my ability to interfere with TechFlow's operations by cutting off my access to corporate systems. What he didn't realize was that the most crucial component of my encryption technology, the personal decryption key, existed independently of any corporate infrastructure. As the elevator doors closed behind me, I looked back at the office space where I had spent 5 months believing I was building something meaningful with colleagues who valued my contributions. Derek's betrayal had revealed the calculating nature of corporate relationships and the vulnerability of individual contributors in technology sectors. But Derek had made a critical error in his otherwise methodical scheme. He assumed that comprehensive documentation and system access would provide everything needed to implement my encryption algorithms successfully. His legal team had focused on establishing ownership claims without understanding the technical dependencies that made those claims worthless. Walking toward my car in TechFlow's parking structure, I activated my smartphone and navigated to an encrypted application that controlled access to my personal decryption key. The key represented the mathematical foundation that made my algorithms functional, and it existed only on devices under my exclusive control. With deliberate precision, I initiated a deletion sequence that would remove my personal encryption key from every backup system and recovery mechanism. Derek could claim ownership of my algorithms, but without the decryption key, his stolen technology would be nothing more than useless code. The deletion process completed, just as I reached my car, ensuring that TechFlow's upcoming product launch would showcase Derek's theft in the most public and humiliating way possible. He wanted to steal my work and eliminate me as a threat to his corporate success. Instead, he had just guaranteed his own professional destruction. The weeks following my termination from TechFlow became a period of careful strategic planning as I prepared for what would become Derek's most public professional disaster. My small apartment near Zilker Park transformed into a makeshift war room where I documented evidence, researched legal precedents, and coordinated with individuals who could help expose the truth about intellectual property theft in Austin's technology sector. Robert Hayes, an employment attorney specializing in technology disputes, agreed to review my case during an initial consultation at his downtown office. His law firm occupied 2 floors of a modern building overlooking the Colorado River with floor-to-ceiling windows that provided stunning views of the city skyline. "Derek Stevens has used this strategy before," Robert explained after reviewing my employment documents and termination timeline. His approach walks a careful line between aggressive business practices and outright legal violations. The challenge is proving deliberate intent to defraud rather than standard corporate intellectual property management. Robert's assessment confirmed my suspicions about Derek's systematic approach to acquiring valuable technology from talented employees. The pattern suggested careful planning and legal consultation designed to minimize corporate liability while maximizing intellectual property acquisition. What are my options for legal recourse? I asked, though Robert's expression suggested the available remedies were limited. Civil litigation is possible, but expensive and time consuming, Robert replied, spreading several case files across his mahogany desk. Technology sector intellectual property disputes often take 3 to 5 years to resolve, and corporate defendants have significant advantages in terms of legal resources and procedural delays. The financial realities were sobering. Legal fees would consume my savings long before reaching any potential settlement, and Derek's legal team would use procedural tactics to extend litigation indefinitely. Robert estimated that meaningful resolution would cost between $50,000 and $100,000 in attorney fees alone. There might be another approach. Robert suggested, his tone becoming more interested as he considered alternative strategies. If you could demonstrate Derek's pattern of behavior with multiple victims that might attract attention from employment regulators or investigative journalists who specialize in corporate misconduct. That suggestion led me to Diana Foster, a former TechFlow employee who had faced similar treatment 2 years earlier. Diana worked as a software architect for a competing firm, but agreed to meet for coffee at a neutral location where we could discuss her experiences without potential surveillance concerns. Derek destroyed my career systematically, Diana explained, stirring sugar into her latte while keeping her voice low despite the busy coffee shop atmosphere. He hired me to develop machine learning algorithms for customer behavior prediction, then documented everything I created before manufacturing reasons to terminate my employment. Diana's story followed the same pattern I had experienced: initial enthusiasm and supportive mentorship, followed by increasing documentation requirements, contract modifications that favored corporate interests, and eventual termination once valuable intellectual property had been secured. I consulted with attorneys, but the legal fees were prohibitive. Diana continued, her expression reflecting lingering anger about the injustice. Derek's legal team had crafted employment agreements that provided plausible justification for corporate ownership claims. Fighting them would have bankrupted me without guaranteeing success. How many other employees has Derek treated this way? I asked, though Diana's knowing smile suggested the number was substantial. At least 6 that I know of personally, she replied. Derek targets individuals with specialized knowledge that can be extracted and implemented by less expensive junior developers. His strategy involves acquiring valuable innovations without maintaining long-term compensation obligations. Diana introduced me to 2 other former TechFlow employees who had faced similar treatment. Each individual brought different expertise and perspectives, but their experiences shared common elements that revealed Derek's systematic approach to intellectual property theft. James Mitchell, an investigative journalist who covered technology sector misconduct for a respected industry publication, expressed interest in our collective story after Diana provided an introduction. His office reflected the modern media landscape: open workspace with multiple monitors, whiteboards covered in story timelines, and shelves lined with awards for exposing corporate wrongdoing. Employment law violations in the technology sector have become increasingly sophisticated, James explained during our initial interview. Companies hire specialized legal counsel to create employment structures that maximize intellectual property acquisition while minimizing liability exposure. James had investigated similar cases involving other Austin area startups that used aggressive talent acquisition strategies to build competitive advantages. His research revealed patterns of behavior that regulatory agencies struggle to address through traditional enforcement mechanisms. The challenge is timing, James noted, pulling out a calendar marked with industry events and publication deadlines. Exposing Derek's misconduct would have maximum impact if it coincided with a major public event where his reputation and business interests were most vulnerable. That observation led us to focus on TechFlow's upcoming product launch, which Derek had positioned as a major industry event with investors' media coverage and potential acquisition partners in attendance. The timing would provide maximum exposure for revelations about intellectual property theft and systematic employee manipulation. Lisa Anderson, a venture capital partner whose firm had considered investing in TechFlow, agreed to meet confidentially after James provided an introduction. Her downtown office reflected successful investment management, expensive artwork, leather furniture, and windows overlooking Austin's financial district. Derek pitched TechFlow as an innovative cybersecurity company with proprietary encryption technology, Lisa explained during our discreet conversation. His presentations emphasized the company's technical expertise and competitive advantages in data protection markets. Lisa's firm had conducted preliminary due diligence on TechFlow's intellectual property claims, but their investigation had focused on patent applications and corporate ownership documentation, rather than the ethical implications of how that intellectual property had been acquired. If Derek's encryption technology was acquired through systematic employee manipulation, that would represent material misrepresentation to potential investors. Lisa noted her expression becoming more serious as she considered the implications. Venture capital firms need to understand the true origins of intellectual property before making investment decisions. The revelation that Derek had misrepresented TechFlow's intellectual property development to potential investors added another dimension to his misconduct. His scheme involved not only employee manipulation, but also investor fraud through mischaracterization of how valuable technology had been acquired. My strategic planning entered its final phase as TechFlow's product launch approached. Derek had scheduled the event at Austin's premier convention center with expectations for over 500 attendees, including industry leaders, potential customers, and technology journalists. The ironic beauty of my situation was that Derek remained completely unaware of the destruction he had set in motion. His legal team had focused on establishing ownership claims without understanding the technical dependencies that made those claims worthless. Derek believed that comprehensive documentation provided everything needed to implement my encryption algorithm successfully. What he didn't realize was that my personal encryption key, the mathematical foundation that made the entire system functional, had been deleted from every backup system and recovery mechanism. Without that key, his stolen technology would fail catastrophically during the most public demonstration possible. The evening before TechFlow's product launch, I finalized preparations for what would become Derek's most humiliating professional failure. James Mitchell had positioned himself to cover the event with live reporting capabilities, ready to document the real-time collapse of Derek's intellectual property theft scheme. Diana Foster and the other former TechFlow employees would be strategically positioned in the audience, prepared to provide immediate testimony about Derek's pattern of employee manipulation once his technology demonstration failed publicly. Lisa Anderson had alerted her venture capital network about potential misconduct concerns, ensuring that investor confidence would evaporate immediately following any public failures during the product launch. All the pieces were in place for Derek's comprehensive professional destruction, orchestrated through the same careful planning and strategic thinking he had used to steal my intellectual property. The only difference was that my scheme would deliver justice rather than perpetuate theft. Tomorrow, Derek would discover that stealing someone's work was far easier than understanding how it actually functioned. The Austin Convention Center buzzed with anticipation on the morning of TechFlow's product launch. Derek had transformed the main auditorium into a technology showcase worthy of major industry events, with massive screens displaying the company logo, professional lighting that highlighted the stage presentation area, and seating arrangements designed to accommodate over 500 attendees. I arrived early and positioned myself in the middle section of the auditorium, close enough to observe Derek's expressions clearly but far enough back to avoid immediate recognition. My heart raced with nervous energy as I watched investors, journalists, and industry leaders fill the seats around me. James Mitchell sat 3 rows behind me, with recording equipment and a laptop computer ready to document the unfolding disaster in real time. Diana Foster and 2 other former TechFlow employees had positioned themselves in different sections of the audience, prepared to provide immediate context about Derek's pattern of intellectual property theft. The stage setup reflected Derek's confidence in his stolen technology. Multiple large monitors would display the encryption software demonstration, allowing everyone in the auditorium to witness either his triumph or catastrophic failure. Derek had clearly invested significant resources in creating a memorable presentation that would establish TechFlow as a leader in cybersecurity innovation. Sarah Martinez worked with the audio-visual team to ensure perfect technical execution, her professional competence evident as she coordinated last-minute adjustments to lighting and sound systems. Despite her complicity in my termination, I felt sympathy for Sarah, knowing that Derek's failure would damage her career prospects as well. Tom Bradley sat with other TechFlow employees in a reserved section near the front of the auditorium. His expression reflected barely contained anticipation, and I suspected he understood more about the coming disaster than Derek realized. Tom's technical expertise would have made him aware of dependencies that Derek's legal team had overlooked. At precisely 10 o'clock, Derek Stevens walked onto the stage with the confident swagger of an executive who believed victory was inevitable. He wore an expensive navy suit with a red tie, projecting an image of successful leadership as he approached the microphone positioned center stage. "Welcome to the future of data security," Derek began, his voice amplified perfectly throughout the auditorium. "Today, TechFlow Solutions will demonstrate revolutionary encryption technology that will transform how businesses and individuals protect sensitive information." Derek's opening presentation covered market opportunities, competitive advantages, and financial projections with polished professionalism. His slides included impressive statistics about data breach costs, regulatory compliance requirements, and growing demand for advanced cybersecurity solutions. "Our proprietary encryption algorithms represent breakthrough innovations in quantum-resistant security protocols." Derek continued, his enthusiasm appearing genuine, despite the underlying theft. "These algorithms were developed by TechFlow's exceptional technical team under my direct leadership and strategic vision." The lie came so easily that Derek seemed to believe his own revision of history. He had convinced himself that acquiring my intellectual property through systematic manipulation constituted legitimate corporate leadership rather than sophisticated theft. 20 minutes into his presentation, Derek transitioned to the live demonstration that would showcase the encryption software in action. Technical assistants had prepared laptop computers connected to the auditorium's display systems, allowing everyone to observe the software interface and functionality. "Now I'll demonstrate the ease and effectiveness of our encryption platform," Derek announced, his confidence radiating throughout the auditorium as he approached the demonstration computer. With a single click, users can protect sensitive documents using unbreakable mathematical algorithms. Derek's fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced precision as he navigated to the software application. The audience leaned forward with interest, investors prepared to assess the commercial viability of technology they might fund, and journalists ready to report on the next major innovation in cybersecurity. The application launched, normally displaying the user interface I had designed with clean graphics and intuitive navigation options. Derek selected a sample document and initiated the encryption process, explaining each step with the confidence of someone who believed he completely understood the underlying technology. That's when everything began to unravel. Instead of displaying the encrypted document as expected, the software froze for several seconds before presenting an error message that filled the entire screen. Encryption key not found, unable to process request. Derek's confident expression faltered as he stared at the unexpected error message. He pressed the escape key and attempted to restart the encryption process, but the same error appeared again with identical wording. "We seem to be experiencing a minor technical difficulty," Derek announced, though his voice carried less certainty than moments earlier. "Let me try accessing the backup demonstration system." Technical assistants rushed onto the stage with additional laptop computers that had been prepared as backup systems. Derek's movements became less fluid as stress affected his normally smooth presentation style. The audience began shifting restlessly as the delays extended beyond acceptable limits for professional product demonstrations. The backup systems produced identical results, error messages indicating that essential encryption keys could not be located. Derek attempted different approaches and alternative access methods, but every effort failed with the same fundamental problem. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing unexpected software difficulties that our technical team will resolve momentarily," Derek announced, though sweat was beginning to appear on his forehead despite the auditorium's moderate temperature. That's when the real catastrophe began. The demonstration computer screen suddenly went black before displaying a new message in large red letters that filled the entire display: "Stolen property detected. Unauthorized use of proprietary algorithms." The message remained visible for several seconds before being replaced by an automated countdown timer. "Self-destruct sequence initiated. 3, 2, 1. The screens went black again before displaying a final message that would destroy Derek's career permanently. This encryption technology was developed by Dr. Alisa Johnson. Unauthorized commercial use constitutes intellectual property theft. For licensing inquiries, contact ajohnson@cybersecure.com. Complete silence filled the auditorium as 500 attendees processed the implications of what they had just witnessed. Derek stood frozen on stage, his confident facade completely shattered as he stared at screens that had just exposed his intellectual property theft to industry leaders, investors, and journalists. The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds before murmurs began spreading throughout the audience. Investors exchanged concerned glances. Journalists activated recording devices to capture the unfolding scandal, and industry professionals discussed the implications of witnessing systematic corporate misconduct in real time. Derek's eyes scanned the audience, desperately searching for explanations or support that wouldn't come. His gaze fell on me in the middle section, and recognition dawned across his features. The predatory confidence that had characterized his personality throughout our relationship was replaced by genuine terror as he realized the magnitude of his failure. I stood slowly from my seat, allowing Derek and everyone around me to see exactly who had orchestrated his professional destruction. The satisfaction of that moment exceeded everything I had imagined during weeks of careful planning. "The encryption algorithms belong to me," I announced loudly enough for most of the auditorium to hear. "Derek Stevens systematically stole my intellectual property and terminated my employment to avoid providing proper compensation or recognition." James Mitchell rose from his seat 3 rows behind me, already transmitting live reports about the scandal to his publication's website. Diana Foster and the other former TechFlow employees began sharing their own experiences with audience members seated nearby, ensuring that Derek's pattern of misconduct would be fully documented. Derek attempted to regain control of the situation, but his words came out as incoherent protests rather than coherent explanations. The evidence of intellectual property theft was undeniable, broadcast to hundreds of witnesses who would ensure the story spread throughout Austin's technology community within hours. Security personnel appeared on stage to escort Derek away from the microphone as his continuing protest became increasingly desperate and unprofessional. The product launch had transformed into a public exposure of corporate misconduct that would end Derek's career and destroy TechFlow's reputation permanently. As I walked toward the auditorium exit, several investors and journalists approached me with questions about licensing opportunities for legitimate encryption technology development. The validation felt incredible after months of manipulation and theft. Derek's scheme to steal my work had backfired spectacularly, exposing him as a fraud in the most public way possible, while establishing me as the rightful owner of revolutionary cybersecurity innovations. Justice had been served with precision and devastating effectiveness. The aftermath of TechFlow's catastrophic product launch unfolded with swift and decisive consequences that exceeded even my most optimistic expectations for Derek's professional destruction. Within 24 hours, the story of his intellectual property theft had spread throughout Austin's technology community and beyond, generating widespread coverage in industry publications and social media platforms. James Mitchell's real-time reporting during the failed demonstration provided detailed documentation of Derek's misconduct that became the foundation for subsequent investigation. His article, published online within hours of the event, included video footage of the software failure interviews with former TechFlow employees and analysis of employment practices that constituted systematic intellectual property theft. TechFlow CEO's product launch becomes public confession of corporate fraud. Read the headline of James's investigative piece, which attracted over 50,000 views within the first day of publication. The article detailed Derek's pattern of hiring talented individuals, extracting their valuable knowledge through documentation requirements, then terminating their employment to avoid long-term compensation obligations. TechFlow's board of directors convened an emergency meeting that Tuesday morning, just 48 hours after the failed product launch. Derek's termination was announced through a terse press release that attempted to distance the company from his misconduct while acknowledging serious concerns about intellectual property management practices. Marcus Thompson, the legal counsel who had helped craft Derek's scheme, faced professional sanctions when the Texas State Bar launched an investigation into his role in systematic employee manipulation. Several former TechFlow employees filed formal complaints alleging that Marcus had deliberately created misleading employment agreements designed to facilitate intellectual property theft. The financial consequences for TechFlow proved devastating and immediate. Lisa Anderson's venture capital firm withdrew their preliminary investment offer within hours of the failed demonstration, citing concerns about material misrepresentation regarding the company's intellectual property portfolio. Two other potential investors followed suit, effectively eliminating TechFlow's ability to secure additional funding. TechFlow's existing investors demanded comprehensive audits of all intellectual property claims, leading to discoveries of additional misconduct involving other former employees. The investigation revealed that Derek had used similar tactics to acquire machine learning algorithms, user interface designs, and database optimization techniques from previous technical hires. Jennifer Walsh from Human Resources was terminated when internal investigations revealed her role in creating employment documentation designed to facilitate intellectual property theft. Her professional credentials were reviewed by human resources organizations, leading to sanctions that effectively ended her career in corporate personnel management. Diana Foster and the other former TechFlow employees joined together to file a class action lawsuit against Derek, personally seeking damages for employment fraud and intellectual property theft. Robert Hayes agreed to represent the group on a contingency basis, confident that the overwhelming evidence would lead to substantial financial recovery. The legal proceedings moved forward with unprecedented speed due to the clear documentation of Derek's misconduct and the public nature of his failure. Derek's attorneys advised him to settle out of court, rather than face additional public humiliation through prolonged litigation that he was certain to lose. The settlement agreement required Derek to provide financial compensation to all former employees whose intellectual property had been stolen, along with public acknowledgement of their contributions to technologies he had claimed as corporate innovations. The financial terms remained confidential, but industry speculation suggested that Derek would face personal bankruptcy due to the magnitude of required payments. Derek's professional reputation was permanently destroyed throughout the technology sector. Industry publications featured his misconduct as a cautionary tale about corporate ethics and intellectual property management, ensuring that his name became synonymous with employment fraud and systematic manipulation. 3 months after the failed product launch, Derek left Austin and reportedly moved to a smaller city where he attempted to find employment outside the technology industry. His LinkedIn profile disappeared entirely, and former colleagues reported that he had become unemployable within any sector that required trust and professional integrity. Meanwhile, my own career trajectory transformed dramatically following the public vindication of my intellectual property rights. The demonstration of sophisticated encryption technology combined with the moral clarity of standing up to corporate theft attracted attention from legitimate technology companies that valued ethical innovation. Within 6 weeks of Derek's downfall, I received job offers from 3 major cybersecurity firms, each proposing senior technical positions with equity compensation and intellectual property protections that ensured fair treatment of my contributions. The offers included signing bonuses that exceeded my entire annual salary at TechFlow. I accepted a position as Chief Cryptography Officer at Secure Logic Systems, a well-established firm with a reputation for ethical business practices and employee-friendly intellectual property policies. My encryption algorithms became the foundation for next-generation cybersecurity products that protected sensitive data for financial institutions, healthcare providers, and government agencies. Sarah Martinez reached out 6 months later to apologize for her failure or to support me during Derek's manipulation campaign. She had found new employment at a marketing firm that specialized in ethical technology promotion, and she wanted to make amends for her complicity in Derek's misconduct. I was so focused on protecting my own career that I lost sight of what was right, Sarah admitted during our reconciliation coffee meeting. Watching Derek's downfall made me realize how much damage I had allowed by staying silent. Tom Bradley became TechFlow's interim chief technology officer when Derek was terminated, leading efforts to rebuild the company's technical capabilities with ethical leadership and transparent intellectual property management. He implemented policies designed to prevent future misconduct while protecting legitimate employee innovations. A year after Derek's failed product launch, I established my own cybersecurity consulting firm, specializing in encryption technology development and intellectual property protection for individual innovators. My company, Cybersecure Innovations, provided services to protect technical professionals from experiencing the systematic manipulation I had endured. The consulting firm's mission extended beyond commercial success to include education and advocacy for stronger intellectual property protections in employment relationships. We developed model employment agreements that balanced corporate interests with individual rights, ensuring that talented professionals received fair compensation for their contributions. My experience with Derek's misconduct inspired me to mentor young women entering the technology sector, helping them understand their rights and recognize warning signs of corporate manipulation. Through speaking engagements at universities and professional conferences, I shared strategies for protecting intellectual property while building successful technical careers. The most satisfying aspect of my professional recovery was knowing that Derek's attempt to steal my work had ultimately backfired to establish my reputation as a leader in cybersecurity innovation. His theft had inadvertently provided me with public validation and industry recognition that would have taken years to achieve through conventional career advancement. Derek Stevens learned that stealing someone's intellectual property requires more than comprehensive documentation and legal manipulation. True innovation depends on understanding creativity and integrity that cannot be appropriated through corporate schemes. The encryption algorithms he tried to steal continued protecting sensitive data for clients around the world, but now they carried my name and reputation rather than his fraudulent claims of ownership. Justice was not only served, but proved that ethical behavior ultimately triumphs over sophisticated misconduct when good people stand up for what is right. As I reflect on this journey, I want to ask you something important. Have you ever had to stand up against someone who tried to take credit for your hard work? The technology industry needs more people willing to fight for their intellectual property rights and speak out against corporate manipulation. If this story resonated with you, please share it with others who might be facing similar situations. Like this video if you believe that innovation and creativity deserve protection from theft. Subscribe to hear more stories about people who fought back against injustice and won. And leave a comment below telling me about your own experiences with workplace ethics and intellectual property protection. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your innovations and creative contributions have value that no one has the right to steal. Stay strong, protect your work, and never let anyone diminish the worth of what you create.